ever been in distress? When I was in distress, I cried out to the Lord, and God lifted me up and put me in a spacious place. Amen. So God doesn't just put you in the same place. He puts you in a broader place, in a more solid place. God lifts you up if you cry out to the Lord. Praise God. Thank you so much, New Season Band. And I want to just point out it's so good to have CJ here in the back row there. It's good to have her. I haven't seen CJ since the conference, All Nations Gathering in September. She's a good friend of Marcia Stevens, and she comes and travels from Northern California and pops in every once in a while. So good to have you here. We love you. This morning is so great. What an honor to have Lori Jefferson. Let's give her a big warm welcome. Does everybody have the sermon notes as well? Do you have sermon notes? If you don't have sermon notes, just wave your hands and they'll pass those out. You'll also need a little pen and pencil, so just raise your hands, and if you didn't get that, they'll pass those out to you. All right, let's give a big warm welcome. God bless you, Lori. Thank you so much for sharing today. Very excited to have you here.
Good morning, everyone. I'm so impressed with, the church in general, but the worship music here is incredible. They played so many songs that really touched my heart, so I'm grateful for that. And I'm also grateful for the kind of exaggerated introduction that Janet gave me. I'm really not that great, but I'm glad she thinks so. So thank you, Janet. So I know that Pastor Sandy has been teaching what sounds like an incredible series, right? Based on Romans 12 about how we can renew our minds. And basically what she's been encouraging us to remember is that new thoughts and new habits can equal a new you. And I think that's so powerful. I mean, basically our habits and our thoughts are what really make us successful or not, right? They make us or break us. And this is especially true in our work life. And so today I wanted to share a few principles from the Bible about how I believe they can help us transform our work lives. They've certainly helped me a lot in my career. And I truly believe that God wants each and every one of you, no matter what kind of work you do, maybe you own a business, to be very successful. I mean, His Word tells us this, right? If we look in Jeremiah, it says, "For I know the plans and thoughts that I have for you," says the Lord, "plans for peace and well-being, not for disaster, to give you a future and a hope." So how many of you believe this verse is true? I mean, how many of you, yeah? Okay, hey, that's a good show of hands. That's good. I mean, for me, like, I have a 10-year-old son named Zachariah, and, as a parent, I want what's best for him. I want him to be successful. I want him to be honored. I want him to be set apart in everything he does. I want him to be a blessing to others. I want him to be able to help others. And, God is our Father, and He wants the very same thing for all of us. So one of my other questions is, how many of you are really happy in your job and very successful? How many of you feel that way? Okay, that's good. Yeah, there's a few hands there. So, what I find is some of us may be happy in our jobs, but maybe we don't feel like we're as successful as we should be. And then some of us are really successful, but, we hate going to work. Like, we don't have peace there like this verse says. We dread it. And, it's more of like we just kind of get by. And I can see from, the difference in the number of hands that we believe what God's Word says, but maybe we're not actually living it out today in our lives. And so what I'd like to do is just, remind you that, first of all, God is our chain breaker. And when I think about that at work, I mean, He can break off everything we have that ties us down, anything that holds us back, right? He can break those chains. He's also our transformer. So He can take our efforts and what we do and help us renew our minds. And we can end up doing incredible things. I mean, I can tell you, just in my career, my life, He's done things for me that I never could have even dreamed of. And I'm excited to share a little bit about that today. And I know that what He's done in my life, in my career, and what He's still going to do, because I claim that, He'll do the same for you. It's written in the Bible. We can believe it and we can trust it. So just looking at Romans 12:2 again, he talks about how we don't conform to the world, right? We need to renew our minds. And when we renew our minds, we can discern what God's will for us is in His life, in our life. And so this verse, it makes it clear that, we pretty much have two choices. We can either conform to the world around us, or we can be transformed. And I think that, like for me, at least for me, most of my waking hour time is at work. And probably that's a lot for you guys as well, right? We like 8 hours, 10 hours, 12 hours a day, 5 days a week. Some of us maybe work more, some of us work a little bit less. But, work is our battleground, right? That is where we daily face choices about how we can either conform to the world around us or we can be transformed. And I believe that transformation happens when we choose to do the right thing at work. And no matter what the situation is, trying to choose the will of God in that situation. But this can be hard, at least in my work life. Not everybody plays by the same rules, right? I try to do, as a Christian, like what I think God would do in every work situation, but let's face it, our coworkers may have different values. They may think about how to do it in a worldly sense, where, hey, if I make you look bad, then I look good, so I can get promoted instead of you. Maybe if I tell these lies about you, that'll help me out somehow. And, it's really tough sometimes to consistently do the right thing at work when others around you aren't. But I believe that God gives us that power and strength to do that. So I'd like to share what I think are 4 biblical principles that have helped me. I had like 10, but I know that Janet told me, Lord, you can't preach, for too long. So I boiled it down to 4. And I know there's a lot of other ones besides what I'm talking about, but I think these will bless you. So the first one for me is to choose to worship God no matter what. And what I mean by that is you can't put anything up before Him, right? You have to do the right thing no matter what. And one of my favorite characters in the Bible that does this is Daniel. I know you're all very familiar with Daniel, but he was amazing. As a teenager, him and his friends were kidnapped by King Nebuchadnezzar. They were carried off to Babylon, which is a really sinful, corrupt place. And while he was there, they wanted to put him in this training program for young teenagers that would eventually serve the king. And so the plan was they would be trained for 3 years, they would learn all the Babylonian culture, be taught all the Babylonian education, and at some point they would be able to serve the king. And so Daniel's first test as a teenager was around food. We're all tested by food in many ways, but he was tested by what he had to eat. So the king said, I want these young men to be eating my meat, my wine, everything that I eat, I want them to eat. And for Daniel and his friends, that would have been wrong because they were Hebrew, right? They couldn't eat certain things, and that food was sacrificed to idols. So right away, he had to make a choice. Do I do what my king and my guard is telling me to do, or do I do what my God wants me to do? Well, long story short, he convinced the guard to let him eat the diet he wanted to for 10 days, one of vegetables. And if he looked bad at the end of it, then he would go ahead and eat the king's food. But of course, he looked great. Him and his friends were healthier than everybody else, even though they had not eaten the king's food. And so when I think about Daniel, that sounds kind of like a minor decision, but it was a big deal, right? The king was commanding him to do something, but he didn't do it. He stayed true to his values. One of my other favorite stories around Daniel and his friends are fiery furnace, right? We've heard that, where Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were basically Daniel's friends and trying to follow God's will as well. And King Nebuchadnezzar had this giant statue crafted. And so whenever the trumpets blew, everyone was supposed to bow down to this statue and worship the king. Well, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego said, no, we're not going to do that. And the penalty was death. And it wasn't just like, an easy death. They would get thrown into the fire and burned to death. So it was, a major deal not to bow down to the statue. But I love what they said. They said, basically, King Nebuchadnezzar, we do not have to defend ourselves before you. If we're thrown into this blazing furnace, the God we serve is able to save us. He will rescue us, but even if He doesn't, we will never serve your gods or worship the gold statue you have set up. That's amazing. I don't know if I could make that kind of decision. It's not like my boss is going to throw me into a fiery furnace, but that's, we're faced with those tough decisions almost daily at work. You know, at least I feel like I am. But as you know, the king did throw them into the furnace, made it hotter than it had ever been before, and they survived. In fact, they said someone that looked like a god was with them, right? Which maybe it was Jesus. But anyway, they survived. Their clothes didn't even smell like smoke. They were unharmed. And I know it's scary sometimes to do the right thing at work, but when you do, God will reward you. I mean, it may not seem like it immediately, but He will. He will check that off as, you know, you did His will, and He's going to bless you at some point. I would encourage you all to really read the book of Daniel. It's only 12 or 13 chapters long, and it's really about how a righteous man lived in a very corrupt and evil society and stayed righteous. And I feel like today that's us, right? We're living in a very corrupt society, and Daniel, his whole life, was able to stay righteous. And he served 3 very powerful kings, and he never gave in to some of the things they wanted him to do, and yet he was ruler over their entire land, or most of it, under each king for his whole life. And I mean, that's phenomenal to me that, you know, he had so much, I guess, willpower as well as trust in God to do that, and he was blessed for doing it as well. So I had a situation one time at my work where basically my boss wanted me to get rid of some people on my team. He wanted me to fire them, and his reasons were that he didn't think they had the right skills. Like, we had a new type of business we were doing, and he said, hey, they don't have the right skills, you need to get rid of them. And now some of these team members had been like on my team for 5-10 years, a few of them 15 years. And they had worked very, very hard. They've done everything I'd ever asked them to, and they were very loyal as well. And, you know, my boss didn't really care. He's like, they don't have the right skills, so get rid of them. And so, you know, some of what he said made sense. They didn't have the right skills. We did need a different talent, you know, to help us succeed going forward. But it just didn't sit right with me in my spirit. And so, you know, I basically told my boss that, you know, give me a few months, and if we're not doing what the business needs, you know, I'll quit, and you can hire a new manager. And that was a tough decision because, you know, I was scared, basically, to tell him that, because I'm ambitious. I'd like to get promoted. He was very clear, if you don't do this, I'm not going to promote you, right? So it was a very, I guess, impactful decision to me personally. But anyway, I did, you know, not do what he said. And basically, a few months later, the results were there, right? My team was doing what we needed to do. And, you know, my boss ended up leaving, and he's no longer with the company. And, you know, when I told him I wasn't going to basically fire these people, he said, well, that's fine, but I'm not promoting you. And, oh, by the way, I'm not going to really give you much of a bonus or a raise this year. So it was a financial impact for me as well. So anyway, it worked out because about 6 months later, my boss left. And on his way out, he gave me the largest bonus I've ever received in my 23-year career at HP. And, I mean, you know, it's amazing how God works, right? I mean, the person that told me, hey, I'm never going to promote you, and by the way, I'm going to take away some financial stuff from you, was the one that actually ended up blessing me the most. And I mean, actually, I shouldn't say he blessed me. It was God that blessed me. But, you know, God's amazing. He can take, you know, your efforts and your will and really multiply it 100-fold to help you out. And, you know, I love that song, we don't have to fight our battles, right? We don't. I mean, God is around us. He's fighting our battles. We just have to stay in His will. So it's awesome. So that was kind of principle number 1, right? Is try to do everything you can in the right way for God. Principle number 2 is really staying connected to God. Like, how do we stay connected to God like Daniel did, right? I mean, a lot of you may say, well, you know, Daniel didn't have an iPhone, he didn't have to play, you know, Candy Crush Mania or Fortnite or whatever your game of choice is. He didn't, you know, Netflix binge on the weekends like some people do. And, you know, maybe it was easier for him to spend time with God. And like all of you, I really struggle with time. I mean, I know we all get the same amount of time, 24 hours in a day, but some people seem more productive than me, and there just never seems to be enough time to do what I want to do. And I know I'm not alone in that. I'm sure a lot of you face that. And there's all these books that I read, for my work that about time management, this system, that system, do this, do that, and I've tried probably about all of them. And, they do work for a while. They work for a few weeks, but, they've never really lasted for me. And then just a couple weeks ago, I read this article about how, basically we need to manage our energy, not our time. And if you recall from physics, energy is really about the capacity to do work. And, physics defines energy as that, and our energy as Christians comes from Jesus. And so, if you look at John 15, it says, yes, I am the vine, you are the branches, and those who remain in me, and I in them, will produce much fruit. For apart from me, you can do nothing. And, I grew up in the church, and I feel like I've been a Christian for most of my life, and I read my Bible regularly, but, this really jumped out at me. It's like I realized that in my own efforts at work, I try to make a lot of stuff happen with my own time. And really what this verse is telling us is that the source of all our fruit, which is everything we can produce, comes from Jesus. Jesus is our vine, we are the branches. And I know it's subtle, but the vine is what gives the branches life. And we need to just be a branch, right? We don't need to try to be the vine in our lives and our work. And, our job really is just to stay connected to God. And it's so important that we cultivate a healthy relationship with our Creator. And we have to make it a priority to connect with God every day. And for me, I believe that you should connect every morning because you give Him your first fruits and you start off in the perfect will of God. And how I do it is I get up at 4 a.m. every day. And I don't think all of you have to get up at 4 a.m., but that works for me. So every day I get up at 4, I do my Bible study, pray, and then I get my day started. And what I notice is that when I don't do that, and sometimes I have these deadlines that come up, or maybe I oversleep, and if I skip that morning time, my day really doesn't go as well. I don't have the energy I need. I don't have creativity that I need for my job. I don't have patience. And, it sounds trite, but it's true. I can just tell that I have not connected to my energy source that day, right? God's Word tells us that His grace is sufficient for us, and His mercies are new every morning. But it's up to us to connect to that, right? And it's so easy to connect to that. It's just getting in the Word, meditating, praying, listening to Him. That's how He speaks to us as well. And so I would just highly encourage all of you to start your day off in the Word, and also, pray throughout the day like Daniel did. He prayed 6 times a day, the Bible tells us. And, sometimes I forget to do that, but, a little prayer before you go into a meeting, or a little prayer before you deal with a tough, coworker or customer goes amazingly long ways. Just last week, though, I kind of screwed up at work. My team and I, we were basically planning our strategy for this year. And there was this lady on my team, her name's Michelle, and she was presenting her strategy for this really important area for the product that we're working on. And it didn't go so well. Her strategy had holes in it, and she didn't have all the details that she should have had. For her presentation, she couldn't answer some key questions. And I was really rough on her. And, in my head, I was justifying it, okay, she's a senior executive, she should know this, she should have done a better job, she should know the answers to these questions, they're straightforward. And her company, we're investing millions in her area, etc. But I knew I shouldn't be doing it. In fact, the Holy Spirit was checking me. I could feel Him saying, Lori, not here, not in front of these people. You should have a quiet discussion with her offline in a much nicer way, and not do it here in a room of all your staff. And, I didn't listen to the Holy Spirit. I just plowed right through, and honestly, I felt terrible about it. And so afterwards, I went up to her and I said, hey, Michelle, I'm sorry, I should have done that. And she's great, and she always has a great attitude. And she's like, no, your points were good. I'm like, yeah, but I didn't make them the right way. So don't give me, don't excuse my behavior. And anyway, I was ashamed, honestly, of how I acted. It may sound a little silly, but we are ambassadors at work, right? We are Jesus' hands and feet on the earth, and when we don't show up how he wants us to show up, you know, it's bad, right? I mean, we may be the only Jesus they see. And it's just very important that we 100%, if we can, to try to do the right thing at the right time, all the time. And, you know, I fail, and I'm sure we all do, but it really, you know, cemented for me that, okay, that's not going to happen again. I mean, next time I feel my emotion and frustration rising, I'm just going to, you know, take a break and do something different. I'm not going to react like that again. And the next day, though, because I still felt so bad, I wrote an email to all my team members that were at the meeting, and I basically said, hey, you know, apologize for my behavior. This is not how I want to show up. Apologize publicly to Michelle, and you know, said that won't happen again, basically. And you know, one of my team members came up to me afterwards and he said, hey, Lori, you know, it took courage for you to apologize, especially at your level. You know, I mean, I don't think about my level, but I guess, you know, some people do. And he said that it doesn't really matter that you made a mistake, because we all do, but it mattered what you did next. And he goes, I'll always remember that, you know, no matter, you know, where you are, or how high you get in the company, you got to do the right thing. And he's not a Christian. In fact, he's like totally agnostic. But, you know, and maybe he doesn't see it as a Christian thing, but I'm hoping I'm planting some of those seeds, right, in his life, right, by doing the right thing. So one of the questions that I was thinking about asking you guys is, how do you know you're, you know, being a branch instead of the vine? So I think for me, it's like, can you take a day off without feeling guilty? Can you disconnect all your electronics when you're on vacation? Not check email on your phone, on your laptop? Can you spend time with God daily, especially in the morning? And I think if we struggle with that, then we're probably trying to be more of the vine instead of the branch. Instead of letting God fight our battles, let God help promote us, right? It's just something to think about as you go through your life and examine it. You know, am I trying to do too much on my own versus letting God do it for me? And so one of the things that I think about is, I think busyness is the enemy of God, especially in work. I heard this saying once that, you know, good is the enemy to great. And when you think about that, that's so true. I mean, if all we're doing at work or our ministries or, you know, whatever you do with your day, if it's a lot of good things, they're going to keep you from the great things. And so how you have to think about that is, I think the enemy tries to distract us, like, oh, it's good for you, Lord, to do this or this or this. And I do it, right? But it's really not the great things that God wants me to do. It's not going to produce the kind of fruit that he wants me to produce in my situation. And so I think we have to be very mindful of this at work, and we have to take action of, you know, how are we spending our time? And recently, what we just did at work with my team is we wrote down everything we were working on, and there were like 65 things, I believe. And then we came up with our top 5 priorities. And what we agreed to do is, you know, all these things are good. You know, when we think about it, might be good for the customer, good for the company, good for our team, but they're not great things. So what are the 5 things that we need to do that are great things? And so we agreed on what those were, and now we're going to hold everyone accountable to that. Like if we're working on something that's not in that top 5, then we're going to stop. And we're going to do the same with our teams, right? Have our teams not work on anything but those 5 things. And it may sound a bit dramatic and unrealistic, but if you don't do that, then you're just spending your time on things that are maybe, you know, will get you to mediocrity, but not get you to greatness. So I just encourage all of you to really look at how you spend your day, how you spend your time, where you spend your energy, right, which is more important, and make sure that it is the areas that can produce the most fruit in your life. And that leads me to my principle number 3, which is trust God when he prunes you. And this verse from John again is, every branch in me that does not bear fruit, he takes away. And every branch that does bear fruit, he prunes, that it may bear even more fruit. And so, I know you guys in California like your wine, and so do I, even though I'm from Texas. And you know that a vineyard, I mean, it doesn't let its grapes grow wildly, right? They have to trim them back, especially the ones that are overgrown. And basically, they do this so that the grapes can grow. And before you can make wine, you have to prune all the grapes, right? And it's really the same for us spiritually. I think God looks at our lives and He concludes, you know, maybe Lori's not bearing as much fruit as she should in this area. She's out of balance. She's got some dead branches. She's got these suckers that are, you know, taking her spiritual energy away. And in order for Lori to have a better relationship with God, I'm going to have to cut off some of these things that are maybe distractions to her. You know, they look good on paper, but they're not the great things I want her to do. And so, you know, we have to get rid of the clutter in our lives because it really will keep us from doing what God wants us to do fully. And so, I don't know if you guys have seen this show on Netflix called Marie Kondo, Tidying Up with Marie Kondo. Have you guys seen it? So Miko and I, we started watching it, and I don't know if you've seen the show, but it's really entertaining. I mean, she basically helps you declutter your home. And one of the things that she does to help you clean out your closet is you have to take everything out, everything, out of the drawers, out of the closet, and you put them in a big pile. And the pile is, you know, a lot larger than you realize once you do it. And then she makes you take each item, and she says, does this bring you joy or not? And it's got to be joy. It can't just be, oh yeah, kind of like that. It's got to be joy. And so, if it brings you joy, you keep it, right? And if it doesn't bring you joy, you put it in the pile to maybe give away. And the pile that you give away, that article, you have to thank it, right? Thank you for your service to me during this time, but good luck on your next, journey. It sounds a little weird when I say it out loud, but I think it's a very biblical system. And I think, watch the show, it's great. But we have to do the same process with our work lives, right? How are we spending my time? How are we spending our energy? And we have to make a big pile of everything that consumes us in our day, in our weeks, in our months. And we have to really look at each one and say, is this something that's going to produce a ton of fruit? Is this a great thing? Or is this just a good thing? And, it's helpful, but it's not going to change the game, right? And you got to make that pile of stuff and separate it that way and really stick to it. Because if we don't, we won't be able to fulfill our mission on this earth that God's given us. And we won't be able to be as big a blessing to others either, because we're not able to fulfill our mission. And what I found, just, practical habits, is you really have to take control of your day. If you don't, it will take control of you. And you have to self-prune yourself, right? You have to be the one that can say, you know what, I'm not going to do that anymore. It's hard, it's uncomfortable, and, it may upset some people, but you have to do it. Only you can really, take control of your day and make sure you're focusing your energy on the right things. And what I've also found is if you don't do that, then God will. He has an uncanny way of really taking things out of your life that He doesn't want, that's affecting you, and putting you in a place where He wants you to be. And, just like, Marie Kondo asks if this item brings you joy, I think God looks at everything in my life and He goes, is this activity that Lori's doing bringing her closer to me, or is this activity taking her further from me? And if it's taking me further from God, He's going to do something about it if I don't. And I've been pruned in my career a lot of times. I've basically worked at HP most of my life, and over the 23 years that I've been there, it's been a lot of pruning. But when I look back, it's all been very helpful. It's gotten me to places where I want to be. One of the first prunings I ever experienced, though, was before I went to HP. I was in a startup after college, and we were working 9 days, 60 hours a week, sometimes sleeping at the office. We worked really hard for 4 years, and we finally got to a point where we had made it, so to speak. We had big customers, we had regular income, we had over $1 million in the bank, which was a lot for, a 3-person company. And basically, we were our hard work had paid off. And overnight, though, my partner stole all the money and went to Taiwan. Went to Thailand, not Taiwan. He went to Thailand, and that was it. Overnight, my dreams were pretty much smashed. Right? I put everything I could into that company for a long time, but I think God, didn't think it was best for me. And I think He's right looking back. That's how I ended up at HP, and I've had an incredible, career so far. I've got to travel to a lot of countries I never would have got to travel for, things like that. Got to go to Taiwan with Janet's blessing for a few years and have a baby there. And even though that was really painful at the time and heartbreaking, it was not best for me. And I think God always wants what's best for us. And so He pruned me and moved me to where He wanted me to be. And we have to trust in Him when those things happen. And even though it's hard, embrace it. I mean, Paul tells us to consider it joy, like when bad things happen. You read that verse, you're like, how can I do that? But you can, with God, living in you and giving you that strength and courage. And I think we just have to have that kind of attitude when those things happen. Another pruning that I had was basically recently, the last 4 years or so, my team and I have been working on this software idea at HP. And if you know about HP, we make PCs, right? We're very much a hardware company. We don't do software. And so it's a bit unusual inside the company for someone to be working on software. But we had this idea, we did a prototype, and we started building it up. We got some traction, but because we're a hardware company, we couldn't quite figure out how to sell it, right? We know how to sell PCs, but we don't know how to sell software. And so we went through some really bad times. My boss, I had to unfortunately lay off about 30 people. We got our budget cut. He told me to quit working on it because he didn't believe in it anymore. And long story short, I felt that God had given me that idea because it was unique, and I knew it wasn't me. I couldn't think of something like that. I knew it had to come from God. And I just thought, no, I believe in this. I'm going to keep working on it. So we kept plugging away, and then I came back from one of a business trip I was on. I was really tired. While I was there, another leader at the company tried to kill it off again, and it was very political, and not trying to paint a bad picture of HP. Actually, HP is awesome, but sometimes you run into these people. And I was just really tired, and I told God, I said, we got to have a heart-to-heart. I know you gave me this idea, and we've been working like crazy trying to make it happen. And, I don't know what else I can do. And He's like, exactly. It's not up to you to do it. It's up to me. And it's like I'm sitting here preaching to you guys, and I told him this at that point, right? It's like, my job is to be the branch, not the vine. And instead, I totally was trying to be the vine. And so that day, I just said, you know what? You're right, God. I'm going to do everything I can, but I trust you. If this is what you want me to do, you're going to make it happen. And so about 6 months later, we got attached to this other part of HP that does know how to sell things, right? And we went from selling just 4,000 licenses over 3 years to we sold almost 350,000 in the first 3 months. It was amazing. I've had people come up to me and say, how did that happen? You guys went from 4,000 seats to 1/3 seats in just 2 to 3 months. And I smile because it's and I tell them, I'm like, it's God, it's not me, it's God. And I said, only He can do that. Only He can do things like that. It's not anything I can do on my own. And unfortunately, I think this is a lesson I have to keep learning, because